Welcome to another NenTot Tuesday. I am Moe with the Division of Agriculture. This Tuesday we have Tom Seaton with the Alaska Department of Fish and Game to tell us about an Alaska Wood Bison Restoration Project that is just a bit outside the project area up in the Minto Flats. Tom, tell us who you are and go ahead and start your presentation about your project.
Hello, folks. I'm Tom Seaton, the Wood Bison Project biologist with the Alaska Department of Fish and Game. During this presentation, I'll provide the history of bison in Alaska and northern Canada, restoration efforts so far, some bison ecology, and future potential. But first, I want you to look at this very special image here. This is the image of the first wild-bred, wild-born wood bison calf in Alaska in more than 100 years. It was taken along the Innoko River in the spring of 2016 after wood bison were released there in 2015. And after years of effort to restore wood bison in Alaska, Fish and Game and a long list of supporters have been rewarded with sites such as these. And we'll see if my presentation will forward to the next slide. There we go. So what you see here is some history. This map represents the range of wood bison over the last 10,000 years based on hundreds of bones and other physical evidence, written documentation, and Alaska Native oral history. No doubt this distribution ebbed and flowed over those 10,000 years. And then hunting technologies advanced, habitat and weather was changing, and wood bison distribution was drastically reduced to one small area of what is now Wood Buffalo National Park, this red mark on the slide you see. And so this slide represents northern bison distribution 120 years ago. And conservation-minded folks recognize this disaster, and many people have led the efforts to restore bison over the last 120 years. Well, now, this map represents wood bison distribution today with Wood Buffalo National Park in the far east here. Hopefully you can see my mouse. And then the new Innoko herd in the far west in Alaska. If we jump forward to 1993, the late Bob Stevenson was a wildlife biologist working in Northeast Alaska, and he kept running across wood bison bones in his travels, and he observed vast amounts of bison habitat. It sparked his curiosity, and he started asking questions and gathering information, and he asked local village elders about wood bison. Bob talked with several elders in Northeast Alaska that held oral history about hunting and the use of wood bison in previous generations. Bob continued to ask questions of archaeologists and paleontologists, and over years of research, he helped document the original range of wood bison in Alaska and Canada. So with this information, Fish and Game went to the public and asked if wood bison was something they wanted restored. And the answer was a resounding yes. Fish and Game wrote a feasibility study and put it out for public comment, and the comments were overwhelmingly supportive and positive. So in 1994, the public set the course for the next 30 plus years of effort. The grassroots support for the project has been the most important factor keeping it going through all the challenges. There's a lot of local involvement. For example, the people of the lower Innoko and Yukon area have been involved in wood bison restoration project for many years. And in the early planning days, they strongly and consistently requested bison in their area. Here you see the Shagaluk village elder Arnold Hamilton kind of in the background, helping to build a temporary holding pen for bison near his village and explaining to all the Shagaluk students what's going on there. We also do a lot of education and outreach in this project. In this slide, you can see my colleague Luke Rogers reaching out to people that live in wood bison habitat. In the last few years, Luke spent more than 70 days traveling to villages and building relationships and talking to people about wood bison. We attend many Fish and Game Advisory Committee meetings and Native Village Corporation meetings. We publish wood bison news issues as needed. We hang posters in strategic locations to get the word out. We do school visits and culture camp visits. We developed a K through 12 curriculum for wood bison and have a dedicated Facebook page with regular posts that you might want to get on if you're a Facebook user. That's where we post most of our newest information. We also have a program called the Bison Guardians, where we train local people. They learn techniques about hazing bison and training bison to stay away from human infrastructure. That way, the local people are empowered to participate in the project, and they can help to encourage bison to stay away from places where humans are regularly, like agricultural things. And of course, farmers can be a part of that if they want. This person sewed a wood bison hair mullet onto his hat and that was kind of funny. The I'm going to call it the NTAP, so the NenTot Agricultural Project. Just to save a little time, I'm going to call that NTAP through this presentation. And landowners there can definitely become bison guardians and get paid to report bison locations and to monitor bison and potentially haze them with some training. More about local involvement and the breadth of our outreach and education effort. In the past 10 years, we've held 13 wood bison planning team meetings that lasted 3 days each and were facilitated. Representatives from all the following interest groups are invited, and travel and per diem is paid for non-government employees. So some of those groups are associated local communities, regional advisory councils, fishing game advisory councils, tribes and native corporations, wildlife conservation interests, NGOs, government agencies, including the Division of Agriculture, and regional population centers and industry. Each interest group has their own priorities, but this process gives them an opportunity to consider their desires in light of all the others and work out solutions that have broad-based support. Management plans are then written based on this and other input from the public, and management plans provide recommendations to decision-making bodies such as the Board of Game, Fish and Game, other agencies, and landowners regarding wood bison restoration. So you might ask yourself, why? Why do we do such a thing? The number one reason is conservation of the species in its wild state. Bison need our help. Also, it enriches the ecosystem through diversity and nutrient cycling, and benefits to citizens, including harvest, come later on if we're successful in the process of restoring bison. So I said bison need our help. Why would that be? There's only about 10,000 wild bison in all the world, and about half of those are wood bison. And when I think of something that's critically endangered, I think of rhinos, and that's only about a third the number of wild rhinos in the world. Alaska currently holds about 10% of the world's wild bison, which is really interesting. A lot of people don't realize that. There's about 1,000 wild bison in Alaska of the 10,000 in all the world. And Alaska has enough habitat to hold around 30,000 bison. And the effort to restore wood bison is an experiment. You know, if it works, we have the potential to establish a strong renewable resource that will provide harvest for people for hundreds of years. So I'm going to jump over to moose for just a second for an analogy. This is an illustration from Ken Tape et al. It's a paper on the distribution of moose over time in Alaska, and it's 140 years of records of moose expansion. So much of Alaska didn't have moose 200 years ago, and with and without our help, moose expanded across Alaska over the last 200 years. Moose have since become inseparable from our food supply and our culture in Alaska. People along the Koyukuk currently have a deep cultural connection to moose. So you see the Koyukuk right through the middle of the slide here. Sidney Huntington writes about the coming of moose in his book, Shadows on the Koyukuk. Now imagine if we could have a part in giving that gift of resources to future generations. And it can be like that with bison. If we put the effort in now and this experiment works, our grandchildren and their grandchildren can enjoy the benefits of a more diverse and abundant megafauna on the landscape. And bison are rare now, but with our action, they could become an inseparable part of our food culture, our food supply and culture over the next 100 years. So this is the big picture context right now. You can see the original distribution of bison, wood bison in light green. It covers all up here on the Arctic Ocean, all the way out to the YK Delta and down to the edge of the boreal forest. When everything down below that's plains, and so the plains bison live down there. But this is where they were over the long term. You currently see the wood bison populations in dark green. So you can see these dark green things here. And then there's dark brown is the plains bison populations. There are some plains bison populations within that original distribution of wood bison. And you can see this Yukon Flats focus area. It's kind of a hazy dark blue here. That's a place that we're hoping to go with bison soon. I'll talk about the lower Tanana drainage herd next, which some people call the Minto population, which is kind of this dark green mark here, but I'll also talk about the lower Anoco population, which is one that went out about 10 years ago here in the West. So the next slide. It's worth noting that the modern wood bison beat fish and game to their own game. This is an image of the wood bison bull spotted in the upper Tanana Valley in the summers of 2014 and 2015. He came from the herd in Yukon Territory between Whitehorse and the Alaska border. And as that herd increases, we expect wood bison to come into Alaska naturally. Now, an update on the Lower Tanana herd, released into the Minto Flats State Game Refuge. Here they are in the soft release pen in the Minto Flats State Game Refuge. So this map kind of zooms in a little bit closer to just Alaska and Western Yukon Territory. In this map, there's roughly 3,000 wild bison with an annual harvest of about 400 bison a year. The green area is kind of the greater area of the Lower Tanana wood bison habitat. So starting in the west, we've got the Anoco population here, which is about 111 animals with no harvest yet. They're only about 10 years old. We got the Farewell population here, which is Plains bison. They're about 400 there, and they harvest about 25 a year. The Delta Junction population here is about 500 animals, and they harvest about 90 a year. That one was started in 1928. By the way, the Farewell population was started about 1960. Then we got the Copper and Chitna herds. Those are also Plains bison. They're about 150 total between the two, and they harvest about 10 bison a year out of there. That's 1950 and 1962 that those herds went in. And then we got the Asiatic herd here, which is wood bison, and it's around 2,000 bison, and they harvest 280 a year out of that population, and it was put out there in about 1988.
That's in Canada, right?
Yeah, that's right. It's in Yukon Territory, just across the border. Interestingly enough, it's about the same distance from Fairbanks as the Anoco herd is, so it's all kind of, similar ecosystem types. But yep, that's in Yukon Territory. Okay, next slide. So this is a map of the Lower Tanana area, including land ownership with state land in blue, Minto Flats State Game Refuge in green, and then the release site is this red star here, and then the yellow here is the NTAP, and the NenTot Agricultural Project, of which a small portion now is developed, but the whole project is there. See, so I'm going to take you through the process of releasing bison in the Minto Flats State Game Refuge, starting in the spring of 2024, and so. We handled bison at Elk Island National Park in Alberta, Canada. They've got a disease-free population there where they provide animals for conservation, for restoration of herds. And so we were there in January of 2024 handling animals, and we did extensive disease testing and a 60-day isolation period there. They are a certified disease-free population, and they kill test and live test every other year. We accepted their testing, but we also did our own testing, and we tested for all potential diseases that could be brought into Alaska, and we made sure that all the animals were negative before they were shipped. Well, then in April of 2024, we shipped 40 calves. We trucked them to the Large Animal Research Station at UAF, where they stayed 30 days in isolation, and we cared for them best we could and fed them up well, and then in late July, we started moving them to the wild. So, but we'll go back to May here. We did a site inspection of where we're going to have a soft release pen in the wild over there by the mouth of the Kantishna. And we did the layout of the proposed fence route along trees surrounding a meadow habitat that contained bison forage.
Quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think I went to the Large Animal Research Station in, it was 2022 or maybe it was 2021, and they had some bison there. Were those the bison that went to Anoco then?
Yeah, so we imported bison at Lars for the first time in 2022, and a lot of those, 28, so there was 40 that was imported then, and 28 of those went to the Anoco. There was already a population in Anoco, but 28 of them supplemented that population in the Anoco, and a few stayed behind. And those ones that stayed behind have kind of maintained bison at Lars for public viewing, and it helps when we bring in new shipments to have bison that are at Lars and calm. They're okay with being there.
Situated,
so
yeah.
Exactly, those new ones, that really lowers their stress to see some older bison that are okay with it, and so they acclimate way quicker. So what we needed to get bison moved to here, there's no roads or anything, so we needed a place on the outside bank of the Tanana where we could bring a barge in deep water right up to the bank. And then we needed a meadow that had bison habitat, so sedge and grass and things like that. Most of the meadows in this country are wet meadows. That's what keeps them in grass instead of trees, as they get flooded regularly. And so we built um, a fence around this meadow here, in an alleyway that went from where the barge is and a camp and things like that, because we planned to hold them all year. And there's kind of some rolling sand dune country around here that's a little bit elevated. So there's a real diverse mosaic of habitat, which is we figured it would be a good spot to do it. So then we set out to build a fence. And mostly in June and a little bit in July, we fenced a 100-acre pen with 8-foot high tensile game fencing. And it's about 3.5 miles of fence. And we did it all with hand tools and four-wheelers, and a lot of volunteers and people from local villages. We paid them to help. The method that we used for fencing there was designed within the Wood Bison Project, so that we can put fences up and then take them down without much tracing. We don't dig our own post holes and put posts in, so we just use existing trees. And so it tends to work pretty good. We've got some experience doing that now. So then in June, we also set up a camp there, mainly tents, but a couple of weather ports for winter shelter. We prepared our supplemental feeds, which was certified weed-free hay cubes and pelleted rations. We acquired a bunch of certified weed-free hay from Delta Junction, and that was set up to be shipped on the barge a little bit later on to the same place. We handled bison at Lars in July and August, and affixed radio collars to them and did the last health checks. So in July, we trucked bison from Lars to the barge company, which is there by Nenana along the bank of the river. And that included 36 yearlings and 5 3-year-olds. In August, we trucked bison from AWCC, which is the Alaska Wildlife Conservation Center. It's about 45 miles south of Anchorage, and they've got bison there too, wood bison. And so we trucked a bunch of animals up from there. It was about 17 animals. So we had 58 bison total that were headed out to the soft release pen at that time. In the process of handling these bison, we put them in specifically designed shipping containers, which you can see here. They just started out being 20-foot Conex containers. They were donated by the private sector in 2014. Steel Fab's company in Anchorage that built them, and other shipping companies just donated them to the Wood Bison Project. They've got no skid flooring in them, ventilation, temperature and humidity monitoring, and we can adjust the size of individual compartments to hold bison groups in singles or groups based on age. We can put water and food provisions in there and put a lot of bedding in there. All of the animals were from Elk Island Park or were offspring of animals from Elk Island Park. And we did a disease testing again before we went out to there from our captive populations. So these are just kind of some images. This is how we load those containers on flatbed trucks and strap them down. And then they go from there to the barge. Here they are on the barge. And then when we pull up to the bank, they've got some ramps that we can offload them. We build the fence right up to the side of the barge. And so we let them out into the alleyway, and then they go all the way up to wherever the soft release pen is. So we got them in there. There they are again in the pen, which is a really nice piece of wet meadow habitat. So in August or September, we had 180 bales of fresh certified weed-free hay from Delta Junction make their way down there, and got that all piled on the bank. And then we just cared for the bison all the way October through May and did the best we could with that. And we did weekly body condition assessments on all the bison, daily fence inspections. And if you remember that winter, 24-25, there was 2 major ice storms, which knocked down a bunch of trees. And of course that, fell on our fence, but that 8-foot high tensile game fence is pretty tough stuff. And so no bison actually got out. And, they know where the feed is. They're being fed daily, so they didn't really want to get out anyway. But we also fed them hay and or supplements and mineral and things like that. So they were well taken care of. But then about May 13th, we wanted to release them when there was a fresh green up out there. And about May 13th is when that finally came. And so Part of all this was an effort to anchor the herd to this general area. In these planning team meetings, the planning team decided on this release site. So those are people from all over and all kinds of interest groups that they wanted them to be released in this area. And in an effort to kind of anchor them in that area, they spent a long time in the pen, so 9.5 months, depending on which group of bison it was. And then they had good habitat all around, so they wouldn't have to travel far to get to good stuff. A couple of cows actually calved inside the pen, which is a thing that kind of anchors some of the bison in their mind. And the bison tend to follow, all of the big groups of bison tend to follow the adult cows, especially cows that have calves. And so they typically are the leaders. We had calves at heel when we released the bison. And so those leading cows were slowing everybody down because they had calves at heel, and that's also something that helps anchor them to the area. And then, of course, the flush of green vegetation right away, they're just minimum searching for food. They just put their head down. After a whole winter of eating brown vegetation, they're pretty happy to have the green stuff. And we had a little bit older animals. So we released animals right when they were a bunch of them were just turning 2 years old, and some of them were turning 4 years old. So, you can release calves and you can release older animals, but calves are the most adaptable to new situations, and older animals are the least adaptable to new situations, but older animals have the most body resources to be able to handle, new situations. So it's kind of a gamble, but we think that 2 to 4 year old age is probably about the best, or yearling to 4 year old. So the next question is, did the anchoring work? Yeah, I think the anchoring worked pretty well. So the soft release pen is right here within this red ellipse, and this red ellipse is the core distribution where they spent most of their time between release and December 14th of 2025. The green line shows where they spent time in a dispersed fashion, like it includes 95% of all their locations. And you can see there's one over here too along the Teclanica, and I'll get into that. They're still exploring and developing their pattern of use. And bison habitat here is really the marshlands. They're along these marshlands are along the Kantishna, along the Tanana, and there is some here parallel to the Teclanica. And in late summer, a group of 9 bison explored these marshes down here, and in early December, these 9 bison that were here made a move back this way. So in June, some more bison had come with them. 3 more bison had come with them in middle of last summer, and then those 3 bison had left to go back to this country. Often the way they do it is they do exploratory forays in kind of a loop pattern. So these guys came down. 3 of them split off, went back, hit the end of the NTAP road, went down to the end of it, and went back that way. Well, these 9 didn't do that. They stayed in these meadows all the way till December. Well, December 7th, they got on a snow machine trail and went up and hit this road. And as soon as they hit the road, they discovered the erosion control grasses that are planted along the edge of the road. Those grasses are novel species, and they're fertilized and all that. And they probably thought that was just the greatest thing. And so they worked their way up and down the road, eating the erosion control grasses, and they ended up spending some time on the coffee farm, which is in this kind of pink polygon here. There's a lake here about 7 Mile that has a bunch of sedge around it. They spent a bunch of time there, and then there's a lake at the very end that has a bunch of sedge in it. They spent a bunch of time there too. They made several forays over the course of the winter to try to get back to the north, back to where they came from, and this is just miles and miles of burned forest without any kind of grass or anything in it. And they'd go out and they'd come back, and they'd go out and they'd come back, and they just couldn't leave this place where they had food. So Fish and Game and the Nenana Bison Guardians spent a bunch of time making sure they didn't develop a pattern of use in the coffee farm, and we pushed them down the road several times. And then we decided in March that we would experimentally try to move these animals. And one thing that really inhibited us working with them is that we had the coldest and deepest snow winter on record around here this winter. And so from December through March, it was, almost always colder than 30 below, and it was like 36 inches of snow. And so just getting around and trying to do things was super hard. Anyway, that's one of the reasons why we decided to experimentally try to move them. So on April 1st, the bison were near the end of the road out here, like 16 miles west of Nenana, and we after some planning, got a helicopter together and some veterinarians and slung the bison. So the rest of the bison, all the other wintering bison, had kind of moved up into all these oxbow meadows along the river, right in this kind of stretch, and they were on both sides of the river, just right in here. And so we moved them to there too. We moved them just into meadows that were a little bit windblown, so they had more access to forage. And so we essentially moved them right next to where the other bison were, and we moved them to meadows that they had already spent time in. Some bison had spent time in the previous summer, and so we knew that it was a place that they'd already wanted to be and stuff. So anyway, we slung them over there in one day. It was April 1st, April Fool's Day. We slung them over there. And since then, haven't shown any signs that they want to return. They've moved around a little bit there, but they're pretty much staying in that country. There's so much snow that it's hard to move around in there. Okay, so next thing is future interactions with ag. I'm going to use the same slide because this is phase 1 of the NTAP project. This is kind of my polygon here of areas that are currently cleared and in use. So it's only a matter of time until the NTAP ag lands get developed and that bison walk through there again. And some folks bring up Delta Junction as a comparison to this. And for the most part, bison and ag have coexisted in the Delta area for about 50 years. And recently, proper fencing has reduced conflicts in Delta Junction to almost non-existent. The lower Tanana area is much larger, with ample room for both ag and bison to coexist. The Delta area has about 530 square miles of lowland habitat, and over half of that, 54% of that valley bottom habitat in Delta Junction is human infrastructure, whether it's military, residential, or agricultural. And so there's really not a lot of places where bison and ag can get away from each other there. It's a lot different here in Lower Tanana. There's 9,000 square miles of lowland habitat, which is 17 times bigger than the entire valley bottom of Delta Junction. So with the minimal presence of agriculture here in much of Lower Tanana Valley, I think fencing and hazing and removal of individual bison can mitigate conflicts that might arise and prevent a pattern of conflict from developing. The ultimate answer is really fencing. If you intend to grow something that attracts bison or moose or bears or foxes or wolves in this remote wild area, you need to fence it properly before you grow the plants. If all farmers do this, there'll be no conflict between wildlife and crops, allowing agriculture and wildlife to coexist in this area.
Yeah, and on our side, we've kind of looked. People have asked about getting grazing leases, and certainly what I say is we're going to require fences for sure. So, and I kind of see that as a way to, we might put some leases specifically in the northwest part of the ag project, closer to where those bison were released, just make them build that fencing to keep it out of the rest of the project. We're looking at ideas. Nothing is solid, nothing is planned yet, but we are thinking about how this project is going to be interacting with wildlife, and then specifically the bison as well moving in the future. They're thinking about us, we're thinking about them. That's the most we can hope for government, is to make sure we both know what the other side is doing, and we're coming up with mitigations and best practices. And mentioning the fencing is great. Thanks for doing that.
Yeah, thanks for that, Mo. And I'm hoping to get together Tarn Coffee, who owns the coffee farm, the one real producing farm there now. And I have been talking, and we want to get together this summer and talk more about fencing options and other options and and so we're hoping to make some progress this summer on trying to work together on this issue. So, but if you have any questions about bison in this area, feel free to contact Alaska Department of Fish and Game. And so it'd be me, Tom Seaton, or Luke Rogers are the two Wood Bison Project biologists. And you can show up at the front desk if you want. The office is at 1300 College Road in Fairbanks, Alaska. But if you just Google the number and call, they'll put you in contact with us immediately. And of course, you can email me too. You can Google that too. It's no problem getting a hold of us, and we're happy to talk to anybody about how to minimize conflicts. But our hope is that we keep bison from developing a pattern of use where they're establishing their pattern of use now, which is kind of up in here, and they're starting to work their way farther north into the bigger part of the Minto Flat State Game Refuge. And our hope is that they'll stay there. And the area around the NTAP is really burned forest with kind of drier uplands, like sand dunes and sandy country. And they don't, there's not a lot there to attract bison. And like I said, that, they came across and hit that road margin that had been planted and stuff and kind of got their attention. But um, if it works out right, there won't be that many of those occurrences. And sometime in the future, we'll have hunting going, hopefully, if this is a success, and then we can even hunt more around the NTAP area than other places to try to discourage use in that area in another way. So anyway, I think it's all going to work out. Okay, so post-release monitoring. What am I doing to monitor these bison? So all the bison we released so far have been radio collared out there. We observe their locations daily. We can get their locations off the internet, but there's a delay. It's like 2 or 3 days delay. So if you see a bison somewhere, I might not know it's there until a couple, 3 days later. I also airborne radio track bison once a month. The intensive monitoring includes counting how many bison are born, seeing how many bison die, and the cause of death when possible, estimating the population number every year, understanding diet. We collect feces every month to understand how they're interacting with the forage in the Minto Flats area, and then looking at their body condition and other forms of health. We also are training bison to stay away from infrastructure, like we just did with hazing them on the NTAP road and then moving them. The highway is a place we don't want bison to go, the Parks Highway. The railroad, we don't want them to go there. And then proposed agricultural lands, we don't want them there either. So, yeah, go
Did
ahead.
I read that you had a really successful story at the Anoka airport or one of the airports
Yeah, so
of
we had
getting
local
them to move
bison.
away from that infrastructure?
Yeah, we released the bison in the Anoka, at least 100 of the cows and young animals, within about a mile of the Shagaluk runway, and all around the Shagaluk runway is just great sedge and grass habitats and stuff like that. And bison like exposed dirt too, because they wallow in dirt all the time. They clean they have this really soft woolly hair, and they clean it in the dirt on a regular basis. So if they can find a place that has open dirt, they just love it. Well, they started using the area around the runway at Shagaluk quite a bit in the year after release, and so we had trained bison guardians there, and we had one guy that went to the airport twice a day and just identified whether there was bison there or not, and then he called other bison guardians in town, and they would go haze them away with the techniques that we use, and if you look at the interactions that these guys had, they recorded everything. The guy that went there twice a day too, he recorded everything. And so we had really good data on it for years. And it started out being, X number of bison at the runway. And then through all that hazing and stuff, it just got less and less until about 4 years later when people are like, hey, the bison don't ever come here anymore. And it's like, yes, because we trained them to be away, and so there's a lot of sad people that want to see the bison like that, but at least we don't have to worry about them but there anymore. And so that was a success story for hazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's, bison, a lot of people say bison go wherever they want to go, but I don't think that's totally true. I think we can apply some pressure through over time where it's just easier for them to go somewhere else than where we don't want them. So I'll hit the Anoka herd real fast. It's been 11 years since they've been out. We released them in 2015. This is a picture I snapped of them, 20 plus bison, while I was collecting fecal samples in September a couple years back. And you can see that they're in good shape. And you can also see this is the sedge habitat that is really important for them in the wintertime. And then you can see the tall grass behind them. And we'll get into this a little later about how this works. But this sedge is on wetter soils and the grass is in drier soils. But you can see that, in that half an acre they're in there's an incredible amount of biomass, and they do real well out there except for snow. So this graph represents their population over time. They have definitely seen some ups and downs, and the downs are mostly due to ice layers in the snow, which are often from rain on snow events, which have become a little more common here in Alaska. You can see here now they had a big drop in 22 to 23, but now we're on a steep incline, a growth phase, and hopefully we can maintain that for a while. If we can have a lack of some of these ice storms, maybe we can get up into the thousands here pretty quick with that population. Now I'll talk about diet a little bit. So one of the things people ask a lot is, do moose and bison compete? And that's really not the case. They don't. Bison just don't compete with moose in the winter, which is the limiting season. Moose are strict browsers, and bison are generalist grazers. So they occupy much different niches. In the summer, they both eat a broader range of plants, but their body shape and their choice of habitats keep them from competing with each other for food. As you can see, a bison or a moose's nose is designed to eat shrubs, far off the ground. I don't know if you've ever seen, like in town, when you have freshly planted lawns, if a moose is trying to eat their lawn, they have to get down on their knees to do it. They're just not really designed to be able to eat at the ground level. But bison, their body is just totally designed for that head to be right at the ground level all the time. And so just the way their bodies are built is even different. So the bison and moose evolved together in North America, and they live together very well. High-density moose populations are rare in Alaska. However, Alaska's two largest bison herds have had high-density moose populations on the same ranges for many decades. And if bison inhibited moose in any way in Alaska, we couldn't have had moose doing so well with bison for the last 96 years in Alaska. So I just wanted to clear the air on that one. Now we'll talk about the forages that bison eat out there. Now, we've had frequent observations of habitat use and diet over the last 11 years with these wood bison in Alaska. Wood bison are really evolved to be in the grassy parts of the boreal forest. Well, what makes a grassy part in the boreal forest is generally wetlands. It's too wet for trees to grow. And so wood bison are really a wetland animal. They like the wet meadows. And so here's three types of vegetation that really works well for wood bison. So you've got a water body, whether it's a slough or a pond or a creek or whatever, out there in the Minto area. And then you've got this semi-aquatic vegetation where the water goes up and down over the year, and it might expose some soil and fresh things grow, and that can be equisedum and sometimes sedges. Well, you get a little bit drier where it's dry most of the year, then you grow sedges, and sometimes in really dense ways, especially in the old oxbow meadows along the river and things like that. You get drier yet soils, and you get grass, which is this calamagrostis grass, which is like a 5 foot to 6 foot tall grass by the end of the summer. And then you got shrubs at the edge of that, and then of course trees. And bison can use trees a little bit for wind cover and sun cover and things like that, but mainly they're a meadow animal, so they're kind of out in this sort of range, and they kind of eat all kinds of stuff in that sort of range. So that's what they're up to out there. If we look at feces that I picked up over time, this is from 27 different fecal collection events in the Innoko, where it's once a month thing. So there may be several Januaries and several Februaries and several Marches and things like that. If you look at it all together, you got equisedum, forbs, grasses, and sedge make up almost 3/4 of the diet, which is those meadow plants. There is some woody stuff in there, which is a lot of it is leaves in the summer. But the problem with this is it's generated from the feces through DNA metabarcoding techniques, and woody plants don't digest as well, and so they're overrepresented here. I think this is probably double of what it actually goes in the mouth end, but it's in the feces it sticks out quite a bit more. And same with the grass and sedge; they're underrepresented because they're much more digestible than woody plants. Now, sedge is really important for wood bison in the wintertime, and I showed you a picture of it a little bit ago, and it's kind of that really sharp grass, that lives in really wet soils. And you can see here in the Innoko that, in December, or these months on the bottom, they're the months of the calendar. So January through December, like that. And this is the proportion of their diet that shows up with that DNA testing of their feces. And sedge ends up being like 95% of their diet in December, and January, February, and it's close to 90%. And then it drops down in the summertime. They don't eat much at all. This number here above each bar, that's the number of months. So I have 3 Februaries, 4 Januaries. I don't have any Mays or Octobers in this graph because that's break up and freeze up where I can't get on the ground with a float plane or on foot or snow machine or anything like that. Since this graph was generated, I have got some data in those months, and it pretty much lines up to be a nice, smooth curve, but I haven't made a new graph yet. So sedge is really important in the winter, and then they eat all kinds of stuff in the summer. That's the point I'm trying to make here. So Now more releases are possible. So we have an agreement with Elk Island National Park to obtain their surplus bison in the future. And Luke Rogers and I are working on this together. I'm going to retire in about 2030, but Luke's kind of in the beginning of his career. So in the future, you guys will probably be working with him a few years from now. So this map shows the non-essential experimental population area. So wood bison are listed as threatened under the Endangered Species Act, but we have a non-essential experimental population rule, which means that we can treat them like any other animal. So they can treat them just the same as moose or bears or whatever. We get to hunt them. We can, drill oil and gas right where they are. And there's no way that you can stop, other resource development things, even like agriculture, where bison are. So you don't have to worry about that listing. Now that's inside this line. So this black line encompasses the whole area that you don't have to worry about the Endangered Species Act. Now, like I mentioned, we released bison in the Anoco herd 11 years ago, Minto Flats last year, and we're working on Yukon Flats next. So these are the three areas that came up in the 2013 environmental assessment. And so we've been instructed to keep working on those three areas for now. And we may, our next effort is going to be Yukon Flats probably in 2027. We've got some animals at LARS. We've got 56 bison at the Large Animal Research Station at UAF right now. And we've got about 20 bison that'll be eligible by 2027 that we could go out to the wild with. Let's see. Next slide is a picture of Yukon Flats. Like I mentioned, we probably wouldn't go there till 2027, which is about 12 months from now. All of the recorded oral history comes from there. If you are curious about the Alaska Native oral history on wood bison, you can go to our Wood Bison website and find a paper that is titled something like Wood Bison in the Late Holocene, Alaska. It's written by Bob Stevenson and a bunch of archaeologists and paleontologists in 2001. And it just gives about 30 accounts of oral history that people have collected there, including the last one being shot in 1918 and several other stories of sightings in the early 1900s. And this habitat here is where all that oral history comes from, and it's an excellent piece of habitat. It's been recognized as being large and good for bison, and it could hold at least 2,000 bison, and who knows what the cap might be. So that's kind of where we're hoping to go. This is a closer map. Again, you got the wood bison populations that now exist, the plains bison populations that now exist, and then that focus area for Yukon Flats. So I think I'm on to questions, Mo. If you got anything you'd like to talk about, I'm happy to.
No, I think you covered it. There's, my concern is, farmers not being impacted negatively. And I think you've done a fine job of showing how you're going to be proactive and you have systems in place to address those, concerns if and when they do occur. And I've spoke with actually Adrian Coffey just last week, and they are happy with the interactions they've had with you. So I commend you on doing a good job and being proactive. Thank you. And thanks for coming on the NenTot Tuesday today. Do you know if you're going to be at the 2026 Ag Expo Nenana on Saturday, June 6th? It's a Saturday, so sometimes it's hard to get us bureaucrats to go into it. But
right, yeah,
you've been to previous ones, so you've done great outreach there. But folks, if they have questions, that might be a possible opportunity to meet with Tom in person. I'll be there. There'll be other people there. So I'm just plugging the Ag Expo Saturday, June 6th.
Thanks. Yeah, and we'll try to be there. Either Luke or I, one of us will be there. Yep.
Excellent. Again, thanks everybody for joining us today. And goodbye.